Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. As you've doubtless seen on the news everywhere, a member of the tolerant left screamed at Ivanka Trump and her family, including her young kids, on a JetBlue flight yesterday. The man, who was a lawyer from Brooklyn, berated her about her father before being kicked off the flight for disorderly conduct. Even a lot of liberals thought his behavior went way too far, but not all of them thought that. Some of them thought it was justified, and that would include our next guest. She's Lauren Duca. She's a journalist, and she tweeted this earlier today. Ivanka Trump is poised to become the most powerful woman in the world. Don't let her off the hook just because she looks like she smells good. Lauren Duca joins us. Now, Lauren, thanks for coming on.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So I think, of course, it goes without saying that it's valid that you disagree with Trump and you have your own set of political views and perhaps you disagree with Ivanka Trump. I wonder, though, screaming at a mom and her kids on an airplane seems like a violation of privacy and decency and good manners, and it raises the question, what are the venues where you shouldn't scream your political views at people? Would a funeral be out of bounds, church, her son's bris? Like, what are the rules on that?
Oh, at a brisk. Yeah, well, I think what is a nonpartisan issue is that air travel is horrific, and I don't think anybody should be enduring confrontations in the air, be it Ivanka Trump with her children or just any other human being in a tin can and feeling dehydrated.
Right.
And I think that the fact that she is with her children is significant. And I do also think that, you know, a mother in public who's a public figure, you know, there are certain levels of decorum that we should be thinking about. At the same time, she does have an incredibly powerful position. And she's not just a mother. She is a powerful, powerful woman who's connected very closely to the president-elect, not just as his daughter, but in many ways as a business confidant and advisor. And I think that we haven't quite been able to define what all those roles mean. So while I don't want anyone being yelled at on a plane. I don't want anyone yelling at me on a plane. I don't want to yell at anyone on a plane. But I think that, you know, Ivanka's incredibly compelling brand and presence and role as a mother and successful woman, those are interesting and attractive elements of her brand, but I don't know that, you know, where do those protections end too? Kind of would ask you the same question as the funeral
but wait, that's not at all what your tweet suggested. In addition to the one that we just read, you put, I think we can put it on the screen.
My tweet didn't talk about the plane at all, actually. So what are you referring to?
Well, it was within the look, Ivanka Trump was in the news because she was screamed at on the airplane, and you say, don't let her off the hook. And then you go on to say in another tweet, Ivanka has it all, and by that I mean a job, a family, and sinister complicity in aiding the most aggressively anti-woman candidate of our time.
Yes.
Sinister complicity. She's his daughter. What is that?
She was a surrogate frequently throughout, represented him in terms of women's issues. She had
Isn't she pretty
repeated
liberal on women's issues?
interviews, and she did speeches on his behalf, where she represented a platform of women's empowerment. And in terms of having it all, I think she's an incredibly successful, brilliant woman. The fact that she was able to balance him out on these issues where he has talked about defunding Planned Parenthood and being against abortion and these typically liberal women's issues that she sort of is a cushion for, I think we need to investigate those things a little more critically, a little more rigorously, and not be blinded by the fact that she looks like she smells like vanilla.
Okay, she looks like she smells like vanilla. I mean, who's objectifying women here? I wouldn't say that.
Oh my God.
No, I'm actually asking a serious question.
My point is she's a beautiful, gorgeous
I don't care what she looks like or smells like. I mean, what exactly do you disagree with her on specifically?
Oh my goodness. I'm saying that she is incredibly welcoming. She's gorgeous and smart. I mean, she's, in a lot of ways, many elements of her persona are admirable and something to look up to is what it, is a joke.
Okay, but you said that she has sinister complicity in aiding the most.
I absolutely believe that.
Okay,
I'm not backing down from that at all.
So it's sinister for a daughter to support her father's presidential campaign because you don't like her father?
It's sinister for a daughter to capitalize on the power of feminism and uniting women and empowering women while supporting a candidate who is the most anti-woman candidate this country has seen in decades.
What does that even mean? Like, why don't you tell? I mean, she's anti-woman because he wants to defund Planned Parenthood.
I'm sorry, is that what I said? I think my earpiece might not be working because that is most certainly not what I said.
Okay. she's guilty because he's anti-woman. She's complicit in his, quote, anti-woman positions.
To continue to stump and support his positions.
But it's her dad. I mean, I don't understand. So I guess the point I'm making is you're drawing this kind of world where everyone who's not on your side is evil and
that's
is,
not what I
as
said,
you put
even
it,
remotely.
fair game.
That's
well, actually,
not what I said.
You said.
Tucker,
you said she's
Tucker,
quote, fair
that's
game
not what
even
I
though
said.
she smells good.
Tucker, I did not say anybody who disagrees with me is evil.
Then I'm going to ask you again. What do you disagree with that she has said? What position that she holds do you disagree with?
I disagree with her providing a surrogacy for her father based on an empowerment of women when that is an inherent disconnect between his campaign and her beliefs.
You agree with her, but because she supported her dad, she's somehow fair game.
I did not say I precisely align with her.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. What that she believes,
Tucker,
don't you believe?
You're not trying to agree with what I'm saying. You're shouting over me every time I speak. It's incredibly unprofessional.
I'm asking you a simple question.
You're not.
Which is,
you're actually
why is
being
she
a partisan
fair
hack who is just attacking me ad nauseum and not even allowing me to speak.
Well,
Tucker, I think we agree here. I think we agree here, right?
No, I don't think we do.
We both agree
Lauren.
that she didn't deserve to be attacked.
I think it's appalling that some guy yelled at her on an airplane and you're saying she's quote, fair game.
I very clearly and calmly said that no one deserves to be yelled at on a plane. I don't want to be yelled. I don't want to yell at you on a plane. I'll yell at you here, but
you're
not
saying
on a
that
plane.
to me because I'm confronting you about it. But on Twitter, on your Twitter feed, where you scream "F you, Donald Trump," "Eat feces, Donald Trump," all this kind of.
Wait, what?
Well, I can't say the word you used, as you well know. But
I said feces, Donald Trump. That's what I said.
You said eat, in effect, human feces
Tucker,
on Twitter.
Tucker,
I can't,
Tucker, you are talking at this trivial, mundane level of argument.
Okay.
We're agreeing.
Tucker,
can I ask you a question? Tucker, can I please?
Let me ask you to account for something that you wrote.
No, Tucker.
And in Teen
do
Vogue.
you or do you not agree that we deserve, as the American people, a level of transparency in terms of Ivanka's role? I think we need to take her seriously and that she's a positive role model and
Lauren,
admirable in a lot of ways, but that she still requires transparency.
She's flying with her kids on an airplane.
In terms of having a government position or being a businesswoman or being a mother.
Okay.
So we do agree.
I agree that anyone who's making decisions about how the federal government runs should have to answer questions about those decisions. Okay? I don't think you should hassle people because you disagree with them in public.
And I didn't say you should. So we do. Tucker, hey, we agree.
We agree. Here is your description of the Trump administration. You wrote this piece in Teen Vogue, which I guess you write for.
Oh, which you guess I write for? Yes. That's not fake news. That's real news. I write for, you guess? Oh, you guess, Tucker? You guess? That's really patronizing.
I haven't read Teen Vogue because I'm not a Teen Vogue
Well, you
reader,
have in front of, your producers asked me if I wrote for Teen Vogue. You have my Teen Vogue article in front of you. My name is Warren Duca and I write for Teen Vogue.
Well, got it. Here's what you wrote.
Okay.
The road ahead is a treacherous one. There are unprecedented amounts of ugliness to untangle, from deciding whether our president can be an admitted sexual predator to figuring out how to stop him from threatening the sovereignty of an entire religion.
Yes.
What does it mean to threaten the sovereignty of religion? What does that even mean?
That means an entire agenda, a platform based on banning Muslims, which is still available on his website.
How does that threaten the sovereignty of religion? That's moronic, Lauren. You're a writer. How does that threaten the sovereignty of it? Pardon me for taking your words literally.
Sorry, how does what threaten the sovereignty of it? Threatening to ban Muslims?
That threatens the sovereignty of it?
Yes, that completely, that profiles based on the basis of religion and reduces people to their beliefs and dictates what they can and cannot publicly believe.
That doesn't threaten the sovereignty of it. So you also accused him on Chelsea Handler's show of, quote, committing a form of psychological abuse that makes the victim feel like they're crazy. Does Trump make you feel like you're crazy? That's the impression I'm getting.
Oh my God, are you calling me crazy? That's adorable.
I'm asking you, you said on Chelsea Handler, he's committing psychological abuse on you. You believe that?
On the American people. I believe the American people, Trump supporters, Hillary supporters, Jill Stein and her cousin, are a victim of Trump's gaslighting. What I mean by that is that he frequently contradicts objective evidence, not that he is abusing me personally. And I think you're smart enough to know that, aren't you, Tucker?
I don't know. I just take your words at face value.
So did you read the entire article?
I did. I also read Liam Payne is 100% certain One Direction will continue. Adriana Grande rocked the most epic thigh-high boots at Jingle Bell, and Blac Chyna and Rob Kardashian went through the messiest breakup of 2016. Those are your other pieces. but I'm trying to get to what you're writing about Trump, taking a break from the thigh-high boots, and ask what you mean about him committing psychological abuse on you.
A
and are you
woman
okay,
can love
Lauren?
Ariana Grande and her thigh-high boots and still
just letting you know that I read you in Teen Vogue as of today.
And those things are not mutually exclusive. You know, now that you bring up Teen Vogue, we treat young women like they don't have a right to a political conversation.
Of, dumb
and like you can't be, enjoy Kylie Jenner's Instagram and worry about the future of this country. And those things are not mutually exclusive. So you know what? I did write about Ariana Grande, and I did write about the abusive, bigoted,
those pieces were a little smarter than your piece about threatening the sovereignty of a whole religion. All right, I got to go. You should stick to the thigh-high boots. You're better at that. Lauren, thanks for joining us.
You're a second.
President-elect Trump is down at Mar-a-Lago for Christmas, but he's still working. So is our friend Peter Ducey, who joins us from Palm Beach.
Tucker, based on a pair of tweets that we saw late this afternoon, the president-elect thinks that the terrorist truck attack in Germany is just further evidence that the United States quickly needs to start using a different counter-terror strategy. He tweeted this, quote, "The terrorist who killed so many people in Germany said just before crime, 'By God's will, we will slaughter you pigs. I swear, we will slaughter you.' This is a purely religious threat which turned into reality. Such hatred. When will the U.S. and all countries fight back?" There have also been a lot of questions this week about why the president-elect has been talking about expanding the U.S. nuclear arsenal and whether or not that talk is meant as a signal to Putin. But today, for the first time, we saw a Christmas card that was sent from Moscow to Mar-a-Lago by the Russian president himself. In it, Putin wishes Mr. Trump a Merry Christmas and says in part he hopes to, quote, "take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as bring our level of collaboration on the international scene to a qualitatively new level." Mr. Trump says President Putin is correct, and he calls that a nice letter, adding that, quote, "I hope both sides are able to live up to these thoughts and that we do not have to travel an alternate path. We are also now a day closer to inauguration, and there are scattered reports of different celebrities saying they don't want anything to do with the once every 4 years celebration, but Mr. Trump doesn't care, tweeting again that, quote, "The so-called A-list celebrities are all wanting tickets to the inauguration, but look what they did for Hillary. Nothing. I want the people." Tucker.
Peter Ducey, ladies and gentlemen, in Palm Beach, Florida. Well, in some states, Americans convicted of a felony are stripped of their voting rights. Just 3 states, I think. The most populous of those states is Florida, and according to one estimate, a quarter of the state's black population cannot vote because of it. A new referendum could change that is in the works. Joining us now is freelance journalist Spencer Woodman, who just wrote a long piece on this. Spencer, thanks a lot for joining us. So,
hey, thanks for having me, Tucker.
The idea is that because the estimate is, as you said, a quarter of the state's black population could not vote because their voting rights were taken away because they're convicted felons, that really the election turned on that fact, and that's one of the reasons Hillary Clinton lost. Am I understanding that?
I mean, my article said that people have questioned the effect of this on election outcomes.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the Bush v. Gore election, for instance, the state's population of disenfranchised ex-felons, which stands at more than 1 million. The math is easy there. If you give more than 1 million people the right to vote in a certain state, put them in the electorate, that's going to change outcomes. That is a lot of people. So Donald Trump won Florida by a little bit over 100,000 votes. Decent margin. But the state's disenfranchised population is 10 times that number, more than 10 times that number.
So I'm kind of sympathetic to this idea, both because I believe that people ought to be rehabilitated, and I think that once someone has paid his debt, you ought to bring him back into society. I just have 2 questions, and no one's ever been able to answer them. The first is, will this result in a better government? Are we certain, or do we, because that's part of it, that's part of the consideration. We want the best qualified people we possibly can have, and I never hear that discussed, that factor discussed when this topic comes up. It's all about political power. Well, we would have won if felons had voted, and et cetera. But have you heard anybody bring up that? Will this give us a better government?
You know, I mean, I think it's always good to have a representation in the electorate of people who are affected by government in a wide variety of ways. So to shut out people who have felony convictions certainly blocks a large perspective from weighing in elections. Another aspect of this is that I did a story for Fusion earlier this year where I went to one of 2 states in the country that allows people in prison to vote. Maine and Vermont allow felons, ex-felons, and people who are in prison to vote. They're the only 2 countries that, only 2 states that impose no restriction on people who have criminal records on voting. And the inmates I spoke with in Vermont said that the ability to vote made them feel more excited about reintegrating with society and becoming a productive member of society because they felt that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I'm sure they like that, but I mean, there's also me to consider, and you and every other non-felon living in this country. We have to live under the government they help choose. So, I mean, our rights are also affected by this. My second question is, if we're going to restore people's voting rights because they're constitutional, and we think that if you're a full citizen, you ought to be able to vote, why don't we restore their gun rights, too? I mean, are people really making the case that you ought to be allowed to choose my president, but you can't go hunting?
The group of ex-felons who are disenfranchised in Florida who are spearheading the campaign to end the state's prohibition on felony voting, they're not focusing on gun rights. I don't know if there's a comparable group. But
why is that an unfair? Why is that an unfair question? If we're going to trust someone to make the most important civic decision of all, who governs us, and say simultaneously, we don't trust you to go deer hunting or to have a shotgun at home, like that doesn't make any sense, does it?
I would venture to say that one answer to that could be that people who have interacted with the criminal justice system to the level that they've been charged with a felony. A lot of felonies involve violence, and that is one way that I think gun control advocates would think you would keep guns out of the hands of people who, in previous interactions with law enforcement, have been proven to be.
They're not. So hold on. So they're not actually rehabilitated. They're not ready to live among us as full and equal citizens. But we ought to allow them to pick the president.
I think that
kind of got you there, didn't I, Spencer? I mean, come on, really?
I mean, access to guns is just a completely different question.
Well, it's a question. It's a question of trust. What do we, as a citizen, what do we trust you to do? I trust you enough to pick my president, but I don't trust you enough to go hunting. Meditate on that. I don't know. Anyway, there's an interesting piece, and thanks a lot for coming on and telling us about it. Time now for Twitter Storm, our nightly forecast of social media's most intense weather patterns. The Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, Metro as it is known here, is catching some heat for the 2017 presidential inauguration card they created. Take a look at it. Tell us if you notice anything weird. Compare it now to 4 years ago, the card they did then. Do you see the difference? Yes, you do. The next president's face is missing. Donald Trump is not on the new one, and Twitter, of course, noticed that as well. Twitter user Melissa Johnson said this: there are people who will be hungry this Christmas, and there is belly aching over an inauguration smart trip card. Privilege problems. Ooh, dreaded privilege raises its head. Dwayne tweeted this: I'll accept DC Metro's self-disgracing snub in exchange for finally having a real president any day. Adam says this: DC Smart Trip stripping Trump's name from their design almost makes me forget how bad Metro is. Almost. Khalid tweeted this: Metro has several really serious problems. An inauguration smart trip card is not one of them. Clearly a daily Metro rider. And finally, Yvonne says, this petty crap is why Trump won. Now, there's still a chance we could see Trump's face on the commemorative sleeve that will go over the card, thus fixing the problem in Solomonic fashion. The Transit Authority working with the Presidential Inaugural Committee on a design. And that's tonight's Twitter Storm. Up next, the Obama administration just abstained from United Nations vote that many are calling anti-Israel. What is the president-elect's response to that? Steve Hilton joins us next. Well, the UN Security Council passed a resolution today that demands that Israel stop settlement construction in the disputed West Bank. Critics call it an anti-Israel measure. President-elect Trump had intervened and said the U.S. should veto the resolution, but instead the U.S. under Barack Obama chose to abstain from the vote. Joining us now is Steve Hilton, he's CEO of CrowdPack. Steve, great to see you. So this is a pretty clear contrast between worldviews, styles of running the U.S. government, et cetera. What is the Obama administration's decision to stay out of this? Tell us about them and their priorities.
Well, quite a lot. And actually, when I heard the news, Tucker, do you know what came to my mind? It was actually Hillary Clinton testifying in Congress. I heard that and I thought, what difference at this point does it make? He's on his way out. This is total gesture politics. It's completely ridiculous. The whole sequence of events where Trump intervened to say that he was going to change things when he got in and therefore there's no point having this vote because he's going to have a completely different approach. Then the Obama people come in and get a whole bunch of countries to put the vote up so that they could just do this gesture of abstaining. Right. It's just completely ridiculous and just makes the UN, I think, look like a joke.
Well, of course it is. I think, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's still official U.S. policy that we're against settlements. Do you think Trump will change that?
I think so, and I think what you saw in his response to this was that there are going to be some big changes on January the 20th, and we really need big changes, particularly at the UN. I mean, I used to work in government in the UK with David Cameron, and almost like every interaction with the UN just confirmed to me what a ridiculous organization it is. Generally speaking, it is almost comically anti-Israel, it's bureaucratic, it's corrupt. It is really in need of a big shake-up. And just as Trump is coming in and saying, I'm going to shake things up generally with his attitude to everything from government contracts to economic policy, this is another area, I think, where his straight-talking style, which you've seen in the last couple of days, which all the diplomats have gone nuts about, actually is exactly what we need.
So the UN is one of those organizations where the closer you get to it, the harder it is to identify what exactly they do that's worth doing. They certainly haven't helped Africa any in the last 50 years. But there's also a reluctance to pull out of it or to ignore it completely. Do you think we should just basically bow out, stop paying?
I do. I mean, I really do. I remember when we were working to try and reform what's called the Millennium Development Goals. That's the UN's effort to try and combat global poverty. And we were trying to focus on the real causes of poverty and the fact that in many poor countries you don't have the institutions of a market economy and a free society, the things that cause wealth to be created, property rights, the rule of law, a free press, independent judiciary, all the things that actually lead to countries getting richer. We wanted to make that the focus of what the UN campaigned for, and it was completely rejected by them. I think that actually, truthfully, we would have a much more stable, peaceful and prosperous world if the UN just didn't exist. Now that is heresy for all the diplomats that make their living from it, but I don't see that anyone can actually argue with that point on the basis of the evidence of what really happens.
Well, I mean, if Trump is willing to cast doubt on America's commitment to NATO, which I don't think any American president has ever done, why wouldn't he be doubly aggressive with our posture toward the UN?
Well, I really hope he will be. And again, there's going to be a shock and people are going to be horrified. But I think that as with so many of the things where he's challenging the kind of sacred cows and breaking all these taboos, the proof of it will be in what happens. And he's also said that something that he really wants to get into is the Middle East peace process and really trying to, as he put it, make a deal there. Now, he knows how to negotiate. He's shown that already since even before taking office. And he's taken this strong position on Russia, on China, right across the board. He's shaking things up by just being who he said he was all along in the campaign, which is a businessman who wants results and who understands how to negotiate. In foreign policy, that is exactly what you need.
It's going to be the 50th anniversary of the partition of Israel, or whatever we're calling it, and the UN hasn't helped at all, so maybe that will help. Who knows? Steve, thanks a lot.
Great to be with you. See you soon.
Thanks. And the battle over the Electoral College still raging. Up next, one writer who believes our current system is inherently undemocratic, and therefore 5 unelected judges should change it. Well, the Electoral College vote has come and gone. Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States, but that has not stopped the debate over whether the electoral system itself is a good idea and fair. Kenneth Jost just wrote a recent LA Times op-ed entitled "The Electoral College Has Always Been the Wrong Way to Choose a President," and he joins us now with his plans to fix it. Ken, thanks a lot for coming on.
Glad to be with you.
So you start the piece by saying Trump's election is another piece of evidence that it's a bad system, and thank you for being straightforward about how you feel politically, and that's fine. But you basically make the case, if I'm understanding it, that the Electoral College is bad because it's not democratic enough. It doesn't respect the idea of one man, one vote enough, which I think is a real argument. But your solution is, did I get that right?
Absolutely. Okay. So one man, one vote is what the Supreme Court said in the 1960s is the sum and substance of the 14th Amendment. Due process, equal protection of laws means one person, one vote, same weight. The Electoral College, it contradicts that. Yes. And later amendments can change the meaning of the original Constitution.
That's right. So everything you said is right, and the Electoral College is less democratic than a one-man, one-vote system, for sure. It's your solution that gives me pause, which is, rather than have the states vote on it, which would be the most democratic way to do it, you're choosing the least democratic way to do it, which is to have 5 unelected justices make the decision to change it. That seems like more of the problem you're decrying.
I understand it's an audacious argument to say that the Supreme Court can strike something out of the Constitution. Absolutely. But the Supreme Court has done some audacious things, after all, abolishing racial segregation in public schools, establishing constitutional right for same-sex couples to marriage, etc. And striking down part of the campaign finance law in the Citizens United case. Okay, so the Supreme Court, way back when John Marshall was Chief Justice, said it is fundamentally the province of the judicial department to say what the law is. And if the Electoral College violates provisions of the Constitution that were added afterwards, it's the court's job to do it.
But wait, I mean, leaving aside, you answered a separate question. You're basically saying the Supreme Court can find the Constitution itself unconstitutional, which seems insane, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm asking you a deeper question, though, which is, if your objection to the Electoral College is that it's not democratic enough, you want 5 people who've not been elected by anybody, who have lifetime appointments, to, by fiat, get rid of it. You want the king to come in and make everything better. That's the opposite of democracy. So why wouldn't you want to vote on this? Why shouldn't the people decide to empower themselves? Why rely on judges?
Because it is the province of the judicial department to decide what the law is. And
no.
Sure, a constitutional amendment would be a neater, a more convincing way to do it. And let's remember, the part of Article 2 about how to elect the president was not the best work that the framers came up with.
Okay,
give me a second. It was amended 10 years later, right? Because their first idea was the runner-up would be vice president. What a stupid idea, right? And 150 years later, in 1933, the United States, the Constitution was amended so that the 4.5-month transition period, which was way too long even back then, was cut down to 2.5 months. So we now inaugurate the president in January, not in March.
Right. No, I know all that, and there was messiness around that, and their original idea didn't work very well, and so they amended it, as you just noted. But I want to get to something that I see, not just in your writing, but all over the left, which is a lack of faith in democratic institutions. You're basically saying change comes from lawsuits. You recommend someone file a lawsuit, and then judges decide, and then the rest of us abide by it. What happened to the bedrock American faith in self-government? You seem to have given up on that completely. You said, well, this is a less elegant way. No, it's not less elegant. It's less democratic. And is that not a problem for you?
Well, you should ask legal conservatives that same question. What about, okay, good if you have. Citizens United was the result of a request from the right for judicial activism. And you hear that on the legal right.
But you're still not answering the question. I mean, look, you have a case to make. I don't think your case is crazy. I think most people think, yeah, that makes sense. We want more democracy rather than less. But why not convince people, like ordinary people, to push their lawmakers to do this instead of just asking one guy to sue and some star chamber of judges nobody even knows to make the decision that the rest of us live under? Is that really the direction you want to take the country?
Well, first, let me say I appreciate your comment, because one of the kinder things on Twitter was somebody who called me unhinged. But in any event,
I just think it's unhealthy. I guess that's the point I think.
The Supreme Court has, in some sense, the final authority on what is constitutional. It's not really the final authority, because once the Supreme Court rules something, there can still be, subsequent, backlash and et cetera, et cetera. But the Supreme Court
No, I get it.
is the institution
No.
that can say in a definitive way this comports with the Constitution or does
Yeah,
not.
but in the end, the people rule, and I think we should all remember that. Anyway, Ken, thanks a lot for that. We appreciate it.
Glad to be with you. Appreciate the time.
We've heard a lot about fake news recently in the press. Some say fake news is the reason Donald Trump won the election, though they can't point to any specifically. Many believe Facebook is to blame for spreading these lies and propaganda. So in response, the social media giant is planning to crack down on so-called fake news. How will this work? Joining us now is Will Hicks. He's a reporter for the site Heat Street, and he just wrote on this. So, Will, thanks a lot for coming on. My understanding is, among other measures, Facebook is going to assemble a team of fact checkers to vet news and then rank it according to believability or some scale that they devise. All the fact checkers I have seen are from pretty liberal organizations. Is this a glimpse into what we're about to experience, censorship based on political opinion by Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely possible. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But definitely the organizations they picked, Snopes, factcheck.org, PolitiFact, and then ABC News, they definitely do have some kind of liberal bias. You know, especially ABC, just look at them like one of their main anchors, Martha Raddatz, cried when Donald Trump won the presidency. George Stephanopoulos is, used to work for the Clinton White House. PolitiFact, all the time, they'll give Donald Trump dubious scores on things he said, which is like totally ridiculous. I mean, it's not very hard to find something Donald Trump said that was untrue, but they still are unfair about certain things he does say that are true. So I don't know.
Well, I was there when Snopes this spring, when that horrible nightclub shooting took place in Orlando. Omar Mateen, the guy who carried it out, was a registered Democrat, and that was a news story. And Snopes tried to take that and say that was untrue. He's not really a Democrat. He was just registered a Democrat. Like the one fact we knew about the guy, they contested because we didn't know how ardent a Democrat he was. I mean, that was just clearly pushing a political agenda, no?
Yeah, no, they mark stuff as unproven all the time just because you technically can't prove it to the full extent that, they make up in their heads. Yeah, there's tons of things wrong with Snopes.
Well, in that case, it was technically proven. They had his voter ID card. The guy was a Democrat. So the point is, are there no, I mean, if you're going to have liberal fact checkers, will it be conservative fact checkers?
Well, even the prospect of having biased fact checkers is ridiculous. Like what does it even mean to conservatively fact check the truth? That's insane. I mean, I guess you just have to hire more people who slant right to be fact checking and then hope they can objectively fact check or at least balance out some of the liberals. But even the fact that we'd have to come to this point is totally ridiculous.
Well, have you noticed the following, that many on the left are starting to throw in with fake news what they're calling propaganda, which I think is another word for ideas you don't like, and that we should ban that too? How is that different from censorship?
Well, it's not. I mean, any opinion piece ever written could be called propaganda. Any kind of opinion that's not just straight news is technically propaganda in some people's minds. And specifically on Facebook, the way they're planning to censor it is they're going to put a little tag on each story that they label untrustworthy, and they're going to change their algorithm to move those stories down in your news feed, so you won't see them unless you're mindlessly scrolling away for an hour.
You won't even see it. Well, thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it. Interesting story.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Ominous. Take a look at this. Do you have any idea which Fox News host this is? Wow, it's a buff character. Start guessing. He's in the friend zone next. Who is that man in the leotard? Time now for the Friend Zone. We invite people from within the building, our friends here at Fox, onto the show and tell you something you didn't know about them before. Tonight, we're honored to have on my old friend, Greg Gutfeld, co-host of The Five, host of The Greg Gutfeld Show, and a man who can rip phone books in half with his hands. Greg, I don't think a lot of our viewers know that you were at one point like a steroid guy, like massive, huge.
Again, you lie. I have never, ever taken steroids. I have never taken steroids in my life. And I'm not even really a friend. I'm more like just a co-worker. You see it. Oh, there it is. There's the picture. By the way, that was me when I was, I wasn't editor of Men's Health yet. I guess I was their creative director, and I was teaching some kid how to lift weights on America's Talking, which was
Did
like
they
a
have
network.
uniforms at Men's Health? Did you have to wear the leotard, or was that voluntary?
I wore it wherever I went, even in the shower. I was one of those people, Tucker. Tucker lies. Tucker lies. By the way, the editor, that girl at Teen Vogue, she destroyed you, Tucker.
Yeah,
she
killed
destroyed
me.
you.
We're not having dinner after the show. I don't think she liked me. That was my sense. We ran out of time before she could use the F word, unfortunately. But she was close.
Yes.
So, but you really were, I mean, no joke, a serious muscle guy, serious bodybuilder.
Exercise is the most conservative endeavor because you actually see the reward. Whatever you put into your body, whatever weights you do, you see the reward. There's no welfare for abs, Tucker. There's no affirmative action for quads. You got to go and you got to do it yourself, unless you use steroids, but then things shrink. So it's not worth it. So you actually have to put the effort in to get the reward. There are no commies in the gym.
Well, so what was your favorite muscle?
Well, I believe that the abs were the 90s bicep. And I'd like to think that I helped engineer the ab phenomenon, like the 5 steps to flatter abs. I think I wrote that cover line, and I also wrote the cover line, the worst 5 things you can do for your abs, which I just flipped the article for the next month and added and then changed the cover line. Little trick there.
What our viewers don't recognize is that you're not joking. You
I'm
really
not.
were. And by the way, you're still in great shape. I think we have video of you doing push-ups on TV. Do we have that?
Oh, yes. Am I clothed? Oh, yeah. This was on Kathy Lee's show. And I did not know I was doing this. And I'd been out all night the night before. So there were things coming up as I was doing that.
Do you still do this? What's your workout regimen?
I go to the gym.
Now?
I go to the gym every morning. I go to Equinox. I get on the stair climber. I write my notes for the 5, and then I don't go too fast because I am old. And then I do some light weights. You should try it, Tucker, instead of running through Times Square chewing Nicorette gum. This is what Tucker does.
What I do.
This is what Tucker. He runs at like 7:30 or no, it used to be like 7 o'clock in Times Square, chewing Nicorette gum. He's weaving like a rat in a pinball machine. Like the drunks, people are throwing up, and Tucker's just winding through. It's the strangest phenomenon.
This is about your secrets, not mine. Excuse me as I choke on my Nicorette. Greg, it was great to see you. You're fitter than I ever realized. I'm not going to ask you to show your abs. We'll see them later.
They're hidden.
Thanks, man. Great to see you.
Bye.
Well, we talked a lot about liberals melting down after Trump's win, but next we'll talk about one who is doing the exact opposite. It's a really interesting letter. Stay tuned. A friend of mine named Rod Dreher, who writes a great column over at The American Conservative, got a remarkable letter the other day. It came from a reader out in California. She's a lifelong liberal who's having second thoughts about the world after Trump's election, but not in the way you think. She didn't give her name for fear of reprisals, but her words were so eloquent, I thought they were worth sharing. Here's part of what she wrote. Quote, in the wake of Trump's election, I'm experiencing tribe fatigue. I'm not tired of the other, the detestable tribe. I'm tired of my own. November 8th and its aftermath revealed to me that I am just so tired of these people. I can't be like them, and I don't want my kids turning into them. I'm tired of their undisguised contempt for tens of millions of Americans, with no effort to temper their response to the election with humility or empathy. I'm tired of their unexamined snobbery and condescension. I'm tired of their name-calling and virtue signaling as signs of supposedly high intelligence. I'm tired of their trendiness, jumping in every left liberal bandwagon that comes along, transgender activism, anyone, and then acting like anyone who's not on board is an idiot or a hater. I'm tired of their shallowness. It's hard to have a deep conversation with people who are obsessed with moving their kids' pawns across the board. Grades, sports, college, grad school, career, and in their spare time, entertaining themselves and taking great vacations. I'm tired of their acceptance of vulgarity and sarcastic irreverence as the cultural ocean in which their children swim. I'm tired of watching them raise clueless kids who go off to college and within months are convinced they live in a rapey, racist patriarchy. Make America Great Again is hate speech, and Black Lives Matter agitators are their brothers in arms against white privilege. If my kids are like that at 19, I'll feel I've seriously failed them as a parent. I'm tired of their lack of interest in any form of serious morality or self-betterment. These are decent, responsible people, many of them compassionate by temperament. And yet they seem two-dimensional, as if they believe that being a nice, well-socialized person who holds the correct political view is all there is, and there's nothing else to talk about. I am tired of being bored and exasperated by everyone. I feel like I've read this book 1,000 times and there are no surprises in it. Down with Trump. Trans lives matter. Climate deniers are destroying the planet. No cake, we're gluten-free. These are good people in a lot of ways, but there has got to be a better tribe. And that leads me to, drumroll, the Christian right. Since November 8th, my husband and I have been taking the kids to church. I've come this close to buying a giant poster of the American flag for the living room. I may do it still. I want to prepare my kids to live according to some unchanging truth, not subject to every passing trend, and this felt like a start. This may be obvious to you, but secular liberalism does seem empty in some way, despite all the things my educated middle-class tribe has to be grateful for. I want more, especially for my precious kids. I'm trying. Wow. Well, if you live in a certain kind of zip code, you know exactly what she's talking about. Maybe you're having second thoughts about secular liberalism too. Maybe it's not filling you up. Maybe it turns out to be a nothing burger and your stomach is growling. If so, it might be worth thinking about. We'll be right back. Now it's time for You Choose the News. We asked you to tell us what stories we ought to be covering but aren't. Tonight's winning submission comes from Twitter. @LimoRec tweeted this: desperate liberal thinks he found the smoking gun on Trump, his height. And he retweeted this story from senior political White House reporter Daryl Samuelson. And it's this: Trump's driver's license casts doubt on height claims. Shows he's 6'2" and not 6'3". We're not making that up, by the way. Another hard-hitting investigation by Politico, the place you go when you want breaking news. And we're going to take up the challenge and answer the question: is Trump 6'2"? Is he 6'3"? Could he possibly be 6'2.5"? We're going to find out, tape measure in hand, once we get to the bottom of it, or maybe the top of it, and let you know. So thanks for that. And on Monday, our segment News Abuse is back. Have you seen an egregious example of media bias or dumbness, not including the one you just heard? A ludicrous headline or television segment? Send your evidence to us at Tucker Carlson on Twitter, or you can email us at tuckercarlsontonight@foxnews.com. That's it for us tonight. Tune in every night at 7 to the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Don't forget to DVR the show if you haven't already. It's almost Christmas, so we hope you have the best one ever. We'll see you in 2017. It's going to be a great year. I have that feeling.